Hey, what's going on, friends and family? And I know this video is immediately going to be polarizing because some of you are typing in this keyword and you're looking for instanced co-op dungeon divers, and that happen to have a hub town, possibly, maybe, debatably, maybe even looking for MMO lights. And I've done a bunch of videos on action RPGs, grinding games in general, as well as MMO lights, but this is not that video. These are full MMOs that have that full potential to be truly massively multiplayer, and hopefully this will help elucidate that definition. And overall, I hope you find some new games here to balance out and enrich your gaming diet, because these are games that are big, but they also happen to be about jumping from module to module, map to map, zone to zone, and then really focused on dungeoneering as well, but overall has that interconnectivity of a proper MMO, not just having a hub town or having to have RPG mechanics. Guys, there can be online RPGs, but today we're talking about the massively multiplayer online games, and the top 10 that happen to be focused on instancing. Okay, so first up on the list, gonna be controversial because this game's not out yet. I never do mixed lists like this, but Crowfall, you can technically buy into it, you can play it, though you're not really gonna get the full oomph out of it. Maybe next year, this game could be at the top of the list, but Crowfall is an MMO that basically has multiple instances of almost kind of like slightly different MMOs running within itself. So it's got these multiple sort of campaigns that all culminate to one guild being able to control the throne. It's listing itself as a throne simulator. And it's all about not just like owning one sandbox territory or owning one sandbox world, but it's like multiple fragmented or instanced MMO worlds. And the really fun part about it is each of those instances have their own mutators on the rule set of the game. Maybe like only certain classes can join or certain races can join. Maybe it's a free-for-all, maybe it's guild versus guild, and you run in and it's PvEVP gameplay content. So a lot of weird, wacky stuff going on between each of these different sort of instances of the MMO that then all kind of come together to make the full MMO experience. Also, you have your own personal island, your guild island that you can kind of build up, and people can kind of visit it and, you know, shop there and trade there, kind of VR chatty. I don't know, there's a lot of weird stuff going on with Crowfall that completely defines this list, and I would put it at number 1 if it was actually released and actually in a full playable state. So you can play it, but not like the full instant, you know, all the cool campaign system just yet. So it's at the bottom of the list. Next up, I've got Albion Online, which might confuse some people, because Albion Online, while it does have a lot of loading screens, it actually is an open world MMO. Even the dungeons in this game are mostly open. Like people, yeah, there's a load screen, but you go into it and there could be like another guild in there, and then you can wipe them or get wiped by them, whatever. You know, some PvP ganker might mess you up. So the thing though that puts this game on this list is because each of these different zones, which are hyper instanced and inspired by EVE Online, but really microscopic, each of them have their own rule set. So as you go through these different loading zones and these different dungeons, you do have blue dungeons, yellow dungeons, you know, your red dungeons, you have your blue zones and black zones. So it's like, you know, they have different rule sets where the PvP is enabled all the time, or halfway you have to flag, or not at all, and, you know, stuff like that. But, you know, that's kind of like, that softly maybe would make the list. That's really debatable. What really makes Albion Online instance-based to me is the different rule sets, sure, but then also you have your private island, you can play the game like Farmville, you can totally exist within just the different cities, and yes, the different load zones, the rules, depending on your playstyle, can radically change how you play. You are going to be warping between the black zones and your main city, you are going to be running through the open zones, but how you play alongside these different zones is incredibly important in learning those rule sets. If you want to be a trader, sure, you could just trade in the economy, just trade in the auction house cities, but you also want to probably go between the different cities, and that's where the gameplay really takes place, is between, you have very specific instance dungeons, and you have, you know, you can actually play instance group content, sure, but then you also, the intermingling and how you play with everyone else in the actual sandbox portion of the game is what really breathes it to life. Next on the list, at number 8, we have Star Wars: The Old Republic. Now, I might want to put this higher or not, but I haven't really had too much experience with the full breadth of the game. I really just kind of played a little bit of the personal story, but I do know the different facets of the game, such as there are specific PvP, there is also open world PvP, there's open world content, there is true MMO content. Apparently, I haven't gotten to it yet for the full extent, just full disclosure as well. But the Star Wars: The Old Republic, in terms of a single-player game, and I know a game that has all these different instances of different types of gameplay while still being an MMO, well, then yeah, it's obviously going to make the list. But, you know, how high should it go or not, I don't know. But what I do know is that I have put it on my single-player MMO list because when I played the single-player, it seemed like a legitimate RPG. You know, it's like a legitimate action RPG, and apparently each class has its own story, and a lot of people are really enjoying the expansion. So when it comes to next year, this is definitely one of the games where I'm going to jump back into and go really, really hard on, because I'm definitely in the mood for that, especially with, like, you know, this new Star Wars game that just came out that it's actually pretty good. So I'm getting back into Star Wars. We got the movie coming out. The hype is alive. In terms of the MMO, I don't often put this game on a lot of lists because I don't think its MMO content is really so fruitful. But in terms of all the different instance content, well, there's a lot going on. You can jump into it. It's pretty bite-sized. But I think I personally need to take a bigger bite, and probably a lot of us do too. It's a very under-the-radar game. Okay, and next up we have it's kind of a similar tale here, and this is going to be Blade and Soul. Now, this is a game that I actually did get to max level, and I don't know, you guys absolutely hated the video that I did on that game, but I don't know what's going on with you guys. But Blade and Soul, by the way, also is getting an engine update. Same thing with Terra. Oh, and you know what? Honestly, I could have put Terra. I could have put a lot of games on this list right in this spot, but I did put Blade and Soul because I feel like it kind of jumped over, like very Wuxan stylistically over the competition, because it kind of had a more impactful story for me. There is like actual cinematics. There is actually like a sort of feeling of, yeah, you're lots and lots of load screens. Really more smaller open areas. But it really the big thing is that it just kind of feels more instanced than other games while being kind of better at it. And also, it's famous for its 1v1 and 2v2 esport arena, where other games, it's like, yeah, it technically does have arena PvP, yeah, this does have endgame dungeons, but, like, other games have those things, and they do good things, but Blade and Soul is just kind of famous for certain things. What guys might not know is that Blade and Soul actually does have legitimately, like, difficult endgame dungeons. It's not just PvP. Like, seriously, you might want to check it out, and if you haven't seen my video, you might want to. I'll link it somewhere, I guess. I don't know. The Blade and Soul, it's just a little bit above the rest of the free-to-play MMOs, in my opinion. And next up, we got to talk about this one. That's going to be Modern World of Warcraft. And I make the distinction of Modern World of Warcraft because classic World of Warcraft was much more of a sandbox game. That's just the initial descriptor for most videos that go ahead and review either or. Is classic is more of the vanilla World of Warcraft was this more open-ended experience, and yeah, very limiting in so many ways, like not having looking for a group. Many quality of life features completely disappeared, but that gave the world more of that literally Warcraft, as well as life. But Modern World of Warcraft took away that and instead gave us a lot of things that made jumping from one point of the game to the other much easier. And it's instance, basically. We're doing different instances of different types of gameplay in literal instances constantly. World of Warcraft is famous for its competitive arena PvP, its battlegrounds. Oh my gosh, so fun. And then you have jumping around from the different dungeons, of course, just looking for group. You can literally play the game as if it was, something like Vindictus or Dragon Nest or one of the action RPGs. You can play it just like that. You just jump down from dungeon to dungeon, you get a guild, you start doing the raids, and even the open world content, we have to keep in mind, with the introduction of Wrath of the Lich King, we had phasing. So even though you're not technically doing a load screen, you are going to be in different phases or instances of the game world with other players, depending on the progression of your character, what's going on, stuff like that. So Modern World of Warcraft, very, very instanced for what used to be a very open world and vanilla game. That change alienated a lot of players, but also at the same time, a lot of people really like that gameplay. If you're typing this list out, then yeah, you probably want an experience that, endgame World of Warcraft can provide you. Alright, so halfway on the list, I've got Elder Scrolls Online. And I really tried to keep games that had similar mechanics off this list. Like I said, with Blade and Soul and Terra, I chose Blade and Soul instead. But Elder Scrolls Online really takes what Modern World of Warcraft is doing, and then also adds extra layers and kind of blends it with some inspiration from Guild Wars 2 as well. So Elder Scrolls Online, what are its different instances? Because for the most part, it feels extremely open world. While it does have a lot of loading screens, again, that's not quite the criteria for the this list, but it does. There are a lot of huge amount of actual phasing in this game where you are going to be playing straight up single player questing a tremendous amount. Very Final Fantasy XIV like. You're also going to be running dungeons, there's arena PvP, stuff like that, and then you also have, similar to Guild Wars 2, you have the realm versus realm versus realm, which is its own specific instance of an MMO game world. So Elder Scrolls Online, while it kind of similar to Albion, how it does have the open world portion, even in between that open world portion, you're still going to be doing twisting and turning between persistent instances, and then also you're going to have your phasing, you're going to have your dedicated instances just for you, running into dungeons and things like that. So Elder Scrolls Online can feel, in some cases, just like an Elder Scrolls game, and in other cases, it's going to feel just like World of Warcraft. In other cases, it's going to be like, you're going to vibe with like Guild Wars or something like that, so it blends and picks and chooses, and that's kind of what I think what you guys are looking for in an instance-based MMO, an MMO that has many instances of different kinds of gameplay. But also keep in mind, because of the build system, different types of gameplay like PvP and then PvE and then, you know, questing PvE, you might have different kind of fun levels depending on what your personal build is, because there's so much customization in the game. You might want to look up some concepts there, but me personally, I play as this really weird AoE vampiric healer rogue thing. I don't know, but that's okay. I'm cool with it, as long as you know going in that this game has a lot to do, a lot to customize, and it can go in radically different directions, then you're gonna have a good time. The big four here, I want to talk about a game called Starbreak. Now, for this list, I'm kind of ranking based on how uniquely or how good they are really fitting this list, and Starbreak is an incredibly special game. Really closely, maybe you could relate it to like Dungeon Fighter or MapleStory, but I think it's much, much more open, and in fact, it is a proper MMO because it is completely open in terms of its instancing. So you do have like a little hub town, you kind of hang out, I don't know, you could trade items, things like that, whatever. But mostly, you're going to be jumping into instance dungeons, but they're open dungeons, kind of similar to Albion Online. So you're going to be going to lots of different load screens, lots of different dungeons, but players can jump in with you in your phase of the world there. It is this strange rogue light shoot 'em up kind of thing that I don't know, when you die you actually can acquire like new classes, things like that, kind of similar I think to Realm of the Mad God, but much more focused on those specific instances, jumping into an instance or a dungeon, running the dungeon with players, and then getting to the end game, you know, those big raids, lots of players, you know, big old boss fights. It's pretty bombastic, it's pretty crazy, pretty bonkers, very cartoon, and incredibly undervalued, I think, for how special of a game it is, considering it's an MMO roguelike game, which we have like 3 of those max now, and 2 of those are made by the same people, and Starbreak also being something mirrored, like similar to MapleStory, being a side-scroller kind of game that actually is an MMO. So yeah, I don't know. It's a cool game. I love talking about it, and if you want like a really bite-sized MMO, there is no smaller, more low-spec game than Starbreak on this list. So hopefully you found this. It's a new one, and you have fun. Okay, number 3 is going to be Trove. And I'm just going to say this real quick. I have to say this every time I mention Trove now, is that Trove used to be a very different game. It used to be a little bit more sandbox. It still had like the core mechanics, but it was way more parkour oriented. It was more challenging. And now it's extremely casualized, but it has so much more content. It is still the action-based kind of shoot 'em and beat 'em up style game, voxel-based, lots of destruction, but now it's just turned up to 11, and it's hyperactive, it's ridiculous, but also they changed the monetization. That sucks. I think it's harder to get classes, if not impossible. I haven't found a way, or maybe I got to do more research, but Trove has just radically changed. For the better or worse, it's definitely more kid-oriented, but it's still a really fun game to play as a family, I think. So basically, Trove is like a Minecraft game if Minecraft had layers and layers and layers of different instances, which Minecraft could have even made the list, because there are some MMO servers that have those instances of the different worlds, but Trove is actually MMO. It's like you go into an instance, and it is like this procedurally generated world that players can jump in and play, but there's lots and lots and lots and lots of these instances, all different kind of biomes and slightly different mutators. It's not like the rules change like in Crowfall, but it's more like the monsters get more difficult, different things spawn, rare items, things like that. So overall, I do enjoy Trove. Also, bonus points to Trove, which maybe I should have mentioned this in Elder Scrolls Online as well, but you do have like your home island that you can customize. In Elder Scrolls, that's really more fluff and aesthetic, so I didn't mention it, versus where I said in Albion, it actually is a mechanical like farm. Trove, it's like, yeah, it's kind of fluffy in a way and aesthetic, but you can actually make mini games and you actually have full customization with the voxel system. So Trove does actually have PvP and things like that. There's just like a lot of different fun, weird, wacky ways you can play Trove. That's all in between different instances. Look at that. And now number 2, I'm gonna put Final Fantasy XIV. Again, I don't like to mention too many games, I have too many similarities, but Final Fantasy XIV to me is similar to Star Wars, or maybe more Blade and Soul, actually, where it's kind of like the single player focused. Also, if you're looking for games that can be played solo or single player, I did an entire list on single player MMOs, which I had a lot of fun with. I think you guys would like those games as well. Sounds inverse and reverse, but check it out. So Final Fantasy XIV, I didn't get to endgame, I played just a little bit of the early game, which is probably the weakest point of Final Fantasy, so disclaimer there. But what I do know of Final Fantasy, and I'm going to completely bypass the fact that it has PvP, because I'm quite confident that it probably sucks, but it is a game that's pretty much like, it completely directly competes with modern World of Warcraft. So basically everything I could say about World of Warcraft is just like Final Fantasy XIV, minus the PvP, really minus the number of options overall, but to the degree that you're phasing in and out of kind of the single player questing. It seems like it's really focused on not the open world content whatsoever. It's like Final Fantasy XIV has the potential to be an MMO, which is why I made the list, but I almost didn't want it on this list because its MMO portion I think is kind of done poorly, but its instance-based content, which everyone raves about, you know, you play for the story, you play for the endgame raids, the dungeons, you play for that kind of content. Well, Final Fantasy XIV is just undoubtedly a king in that. You know, it's popular for those reasons that are expressed constantly on the internet. So, do I put Final Fantasy XIV highly on most MMO lists? Absolutely not. Like I said, I haven't even played to endgame, which most of these games on this list I did. But for what I did play, I could see the potential, and I do want to play it again as a Final Fantasy game. See, that's the distinction. People who love Final Fantasy XIV, I think play it as like an online, you know, RPG. But if you play it as an MMO and you're expecting like these Elder Scrolls style battles, or like, you know, this crazy 1v1 PvP like in Blade and Soul, it's not gonna happen. Now, Final Fantasy XIV, again, does lack a lot of variety. Maybe it shouldn't be so high on this list, since most of it was mostly negative, but I think for what it does, you know, it probably does it the best. Alright, but we're at number 1. Obviously, if you guys know me or have seen my other list that might have had a little hint towards this, Guild Wars 2. Guild Wars 2. I believe it was number 1 in so many lists, definitely number 1 in the single-player MMO list that I did. But Guild Wars 2, just to spoil that video, go watch it please. But Guild Wars 2 just offers most of what all these have. Even has like guild housing in a way. You can have your own guild house depending on the expansion you have. You can have so much fun in Guild Wars 2 in such a variety of ways, especially the fact that they have all this open content in most of the instances. You have the dungeons, it's fun to do those, and then you have the fractals, which are like a really high level dungeon kind of thing. You got your raids, you got your PvP. Oh, but you have like arena PvP, a number of different kind of arenas in the PvP. You do have your world versus world versus world, which is like Elder Scrolls Online as well, and that in itself is extremely instanced because all the different servers have even multiple instances, kind of, sort of the world versus world, which is this open world MMO space. It's hard to describe, actually, kind of Crowfall-y in a way. And everyone is fighting for a victory in like tournament battle royale sort of thing. Guild Wars 2 also has these seasonal events, which have their own sort of open instances, like the Mad King's Tower, where like, you know, dozens of players get thrown in and have to climb up the tower as it's collapsing. You do have these, like the Halloween maze. You do have the Christmas thing that they do. It kind of changes every year. The seasonal events. Oh my god, the Aetheryte area was the coolest. I don't think they do that anymore. They really should bring back some of those. The Queen's Gauntlet was so hype. There's so many of these that a lot of you guys have no idea what I'm talking about because a lot of them were one and done. That kind of is what made Guild Wars 2 special for a while, is that a lot of these events, these instances, were literal instances of instances. Like, they just happened like for a week and they're gone forever. Crazy. Guild Wars 2 just has so much to offer. in terms of the open world, which is actually also really kind of, in a way, for an MMO, constrained instances, similar to Albion Online. So it's technically open world, but you do have all these little instances of open worlds, throughout the different continents, the different zones. You have so much to do in between that. The living story, because just like actually Star Wars: The Old Republic, you have a literal single-player campaign, which can be co-op technically, but it's a single-player campaign that's ever expanding. So more than any other MMO, Guild Wars 2, I think, offers the largest variety of different MMO content, and then also just RPG content as well. And I think to a great extent, it does most of those things better than other MMOs. Now, as a full package, I can see why maybe it would be disheartening, because it's not like the raiding MMO, it's not like the PvP MMO, despite it being called Guild Wars. It's really, in a lot of ways, it does lack because of this random focus, like the world versus world, which is really special. Doesn't mean it's really, really great, really good, or even competitive, which it's supposed to be. I totally understand that, but at the same time, if you can go in and understand that there is all these different rides to ride, this is a true theme park. A theme park isn't just one roller coaster, World of Warcraft, Final Fantasy XIV. It's not just a single ride. It's a number of rides that you can pick and choose from. And Guild Wars 2 has, overall, the highest quality of rides and the largest variety. So, hope you guys keep the hype alive for that one. But that's it. That's my list of instance-based MMOs. You know what? Thoughts and opinions were very up and down for a lot of these games, but that's just how reviews should be. It shouldn't just be glowing praise, even if it is a top 10 list. And I really want to get you guys into these games, but also get you in the right mindset. Understand the speed bumps of jumping into these games, understand what they really offer, and then from there you can pursue that potential. And then also, jump over the hurdles of some of the issues that the games might have. These are living, breathing games, of course. So they might change from time to time, or maybe even since I played them. So if I got anything wrong, please let me know in the comments below. And if you're mad at me for not including games like Monster Hunter or Dark Souls, guys, I just don't think those are MMOs. They're literally not. That's not the definition. These games are MMOs. Hopefully you guys can have a blast with them. Whether you love them as an MMO or as a single-player RPG or as a PvP game or however, I hope you find something here that is enjoyable to you, and maybe you can find a new experience once you actually jump in. That's kind of the beauty of these big ol' games. So guys, that's it for me. Hopefully you stay tuned and subscribe for the next one. My name's Skylent, and I'll see you then.